The healthy relationships is and being able to communicate and educate our kids. It can be a sticky thing because on one hand, it's like we do want to cover the bases, but on the other hand, it's like, do I feel I need to introduce things that may not be necessary at the time? Or do we let them kind of unfold and then help them navigate through? So, but the thing is, we need to be aware and on guard that as we start to see things, to be able to probe a little bit and have that dialogue and have those conversations.
Welcome to Real Talk with the Parenting Blueprint Coaches, where we discuss all aspects of parenting using the foundation of understanding personality dynamics to raise independent, responsible, and resilient children. My name is Karen Wagner, founder of Teaching Our Youth and the Parenting Blueprint. Let's dig right in with today's topic and have some real talk with the Parenting Blueprint Coaches.
We have got a wonderful topic that we want to share with you. If you are a parent of a tween and a teen, you need to stay on board and hang in with us. And let me just ask you a question. Do you worry or have concerns when your tween or teen starts expressing an interest in dating? I'm going to tell you, you are not alone. Everyone here, it's all going to happen. It's a rite of passage for our kids. It is just a natural progression in their development. But let me tell you, in this day and age, it can be a little scary. It's not an easy time to navigate with your kids. They can become private about their dating life, but as parents, we need to be able to keep open communication and walk alongside them so they can develop some healthy relationships. My name is Karen Wagner. I am founder of Teaching Our Youth and the Parenting Blueprint. And today I am joined by two of our Parenting Blueprint coaches, Mindy Green and both Janet Krebs, as we discuss the 5 do's and don'ts for navigating the teen scene together. I remember when my kids started to express interest in I guess friends, boyfriends, girlfriends, they got a little weird. And so we're going to share with you 5 do's and 5 don'ts as we navigate through the teen dating scene. So the first thing that we really want to focus on, and this is looking at the do's, is to keep open communication. So Mindy, would you be willing to kind of share with us a little bit about why is that so important and what would that look like?
Certainly. So, I think you raised a good point. They can be really private, or they seem really awkward or uncomfortable when we are talking about these things. And that's where open communication is really important, because we want to show them that whatever they share with us, that we're not going to be shocked. Now, I'm not saying that internally you may not be shocked. You could be like that duck, seeming calm on the exterior, but the little feet are paddling underneath the water. And I've had that myself with my own kids. They tell me certain things and now that I have to say my kids are all young adults, but I remember when we were in this phase and, I really needed to be open-minded, which I think is part of the communication piece, non-judgmental. And that's not to say that you might not have some questions, but I found with open communication, the easiest way for me to get things from my kids was when we were not making eye contact, because this is awkward. It's uncomfortable for them. They're going to tell you weird things. That way they can't necessarily see your facial expression. You can't see their facial expression. So as we're driving along down the road, we would end up having these really nice conversations. And what I found is that I really needed to, and this is true for a lot of different things, I really needed to listen more than I talked. And so, we often hear that phrase, we have 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. So that was one of the things that I really tried to pay attention to, was that I needed to listen more than I talked.
Yeah.
So that's part of that open communication.
Yes. So what were some questions that you would ask your kids? I mean, for instance, with my kids, and some of this started in middle school with my kids, I would just ask them, so do you have a class together, or how did you meet them? Or what do you like best about them? Or just to get them to talk about it, that it was okay to just talk about another person and not ask about feelings or things. Just try and keep it general terms, and so that was something that just to try and get them to open up, that it was okay to talk about another person that may have be of the opposite sex, a boyfriend or girlfriend that they like. They've had friends, but this one, usually the guys are hanging with the guys, the girls are hanging with the girls, and now you have someone of the opposite sex, and just to be okay and be open with that. So great suggestions there. So the next thing we wanted to talk about on our do's is to set some clear expectations. Janet, what are your thoughts on that? How do we set those clear expectations?
Well, I'm just going to set the stage by saying that boundaries often is a really bad word. Like, people find it very limiting. And actually, it's the exact opposite. Boundaries are kids' safe zone. Mm-hmm. And when children feel safe, they thrive. And the opposite is also true. And so I would it's okay for them to know that there are certain sets of expectations and boundaries. And one of my favorite phrases was, I love you enough to, and then I would share my limitation. And then there was really there was no pushback, because I prefaced it with, I love you enough to make you come home by 11 o'clock or whatever it was. And it was just like, okay, Mom, because what are they supposed to say? Right.
Right.
So I would it follows with communication, but I believe boundaries, rules, expectations, whatever you want to call it, whatever the modern day terms are, admittedly, mine are also flown and groans. And so I don't know what the current terminology is. Maybe somebody in the audience will share with us what it is, but boundaries and expectations are alive and well. And I believe that they allow kids to feel really safe.
Yes. So just what would be some examples when parents are trying to think about what would be some examples of setting clear expectations? And I'm sure everyone has different values in their home, but I think sometimes we get confused as to what is a clear expectation? How would I be setting that? So can you give some examples of what would be clear expectations when we look at curfews, communication, appropriate behavior? How would you approach that?
I think the curfew was the example that I just gave. And in all fairness, for all of our listeners, we as a group, we use social media to gain information. I use social media to gain information. And I think a big one right now, when it comes to opposite sex, whether it's dating, friendships, or whatever, is lots of parents are wondering whether or not kids are allowed in their bedrooms.
Yeah,
I see that a lot. And, there's no right or wrong. And I think that would be my end all answer. Whatever is correct for you as a parent, that's your value system.
Right.
And hard stop. You don't have to make compromises. You don't even have to explain yourself to your kids. It's your house. If you don't want that, if you are not comfortable, if you want doors open or whatever it is, I think that's okay. And that may very well be a very old school, but for me, it says a lot about parents standing in their leadership space and enforcing, just allowing values to remain alive and well. We should never compromise our personal values as parents.
Very, very well put, Janet. No, I really appreciate that. And I know with my kids, we all spent time together as a family, when we really didn't. And maybe that was our values, not leaving a lot of alone time. It was just having one more kid in the house, one more person for dinner, or one more person that we went on the picnic with, or we went to the zoo with. And so in those early years, when they first started dating, that's kind of the way we approached it. So we were not in those early years, especially in the room with door open, none of that stuff. You want to watch TV, we watch TV in the public space. And again, as you're saying, parents just need to be comfortable with what's comfortable with you and your family values. So
know thyself. Just know thyself. And remember, I remember I used to sneak around. So if they really want to, they're going to sneak around and they're going to go or whatever. They're going to do that anyway. So if you don't want it in your own home, then just don't allow it. Because
yeah, just and it is right, and it is setting those clear expectations. So the next do we want to do, the next one of the 5 do's is educate your kids about healthy relationships. And I'm going to punt this to you, Mindy. Educating about the healthy relationships. What are the things that we need to talk about, and even how do we approach this?
I think this is so loaded, isn't it? There's just so much here,
Yeah,
and
we could do a whole session on this one.
Yes.
Yep.
So I really want to pick it apart a little bit. And, I think first of all, like when we're talking about healthy relationships, I think that and I know it's further down, but that they're gathering that information from our own relationships that we have with our partners, our spouses, whoever it is in our lives. And so when they can see that, then there are also ways that we can reference that when we're having these conversations. This is about, being respectful, feeling like that if you say yes or no, that those are respected as well, that consent piece of it. There is, what all? It's the communication there, that when they feel like they're being seen and heard and valued. So those are all aspects of healthy relationships. And we want our kids to see that, first of all, in our relationship with them. And then also that that's something that they can expect from whoever they're involved with or whoever they have interest in. So, and I see this a lot too, like when we're looking on social media, there have been some concerns that parents have brought up about the way that their child's significant other at that point, like their boyfriend or girlfriend, the way that they're being spoken to. And, there was one lady who was talking about her daughter. Every time they go someplace, she has to let her boyfriend know that they made it. And so they're 15. And so, so those are some of those conversations that you can have about, well, what does this look like for you? What is it that you want from this relationship? And of course, I remember being that age and I thought, oh, if my boyfriend wants to know where I am and who I'm with and all of those things, that just shows that he cares. And, so those are opportunities for us as parents then to dive a little deeper and say, okay, let's look at this in a bigger picture. And is this something that you want to go to? Not that they would be with this person necessarily, but is this what you would want as an adult? And how does this make you feel? And, is that something that you're doing as well? Because, you're really in a healthy relationship, there's a level of trust.
Yes. Yeah. Some really good things there. The healthy relationships is, and being able to communicate and educate our kids, it can be a sticky thing because on one hand, it's like we do want to cover the bases, but on the other hand, it's like, do I feel I need to introduce things that may not be necessary at the time? Or do we let them kind of unfold and then help them navigate through? So, but the thing is, we need to be aware and on guard that as we start to see things, to be able to probe a little bit and have that dialogue and have those conversations. What does a healthy relationship look like? And there are a lot of controlling and manipulative relationships out there, sometimes in those early years, because people are insecure at this young age, and unsure about the relationship. And to be able to have those conversations, that how would that make you feel older? Is dad always, calling and checking on me, because of what has been modeled in the past. And so educate about what that really looks like: consent, respect, and communication, the way they speak to each other, as you were saying, just being able to have that communication, or where someone is short or curt or uses a harsh tone. And you can almost read the body language on your kids when you start to see that, and not be able to address it in the moment, but then after have a conversation with your child about how that made them feel. So really good stuff there. And then this leads to, Mindy, what you had spoken about before, and that's leading by example. Leading by example. Jan, I'm going to let you take the lead on the lead by example. Why is that so important?
Well, it's actually a beautiful segue from the last point in my mind, because I think when we are talking about dating and do's and don'ts and relationships and boundaries and all of that, we have to remember that we are talking about a chronologically aged group of people who really don't have the developed brains to make adult decisions on anything that we're talking about. And so our example, us setting the modeling for them, becomes really important. And we want, I remember, especially because I had a daughter, and so that might be biased. My son was taught respect, but for my daughter, like, these are young people, my son as well, that need to figure out themselves right now. Who am I in this world as a 15-year-old, as an 18-year-old, let alone introducing another same aged person who is equally as immature chronologically, brain development wise, as I am. So we need to always keep their development top of mind. So to your example, being disrespected, it's like, no, you are like, no, you don't need to do that kind of a thing. And so leading by example is like, in an ideal world, Karen, like, we would all be able to model healthy relationships. The fact is, many of our children are in homes that are not modeled homes. And so it's our job to, if we don't have that relationship at home, if we don't have a role modeled family framework, then we need to be able to talk about, like, you know what, this is the way in which our house is, and it's really not okay. I need for you to understand that it doesn't have to be like this. Yeah. Really interesting case in point. For a long time, Stephen, my husband, commuted out of state, and I had to tell my kids, this is not normal.
Right.
Like, your husbands are supposed to live in the house. They're not supposed to come home on weekends. Yeah. Because for a very good number of years, they just thought that that was normal.
Right.
And so had I not addressed it, they would have just thought that was normal. Yeah. So it was my job to say, look, like, you should expect better. Like, this is not normal. There was no shame in that. I just wanted, so if you don't have the example that you're living with, be able to talk about a healthy scenario and be able to communicate what that would look like for kids so that they understand the difference.
Great point. That is such a great point, because Mark and I were a commuter couple there for a while too, for a couple of years. And it was, we were living in different states, and he was coming home on the weekends, and it was hard for me, and it was hard for them to not have him there. So being able to bring that to the forefront, but it is so powerful what we're modeling in our relationships and how we speak to others, how we treat others, because that becomes their normal. And so when there is yelling and disrespect in the home, you'll find that that's all they know, how to treat the other person. So it is so important, parents, that we do our best when we are around our children to model what healthy relationships are like. And I know it is not a perfect world, and there are going to be times where things are going to be off, but kids need to see us have conflict resolution skills to be able to communicate things. They need to know that when you're with your spouse, that we know how to compromise and communicate and work through things. They are watching and they are feeling the feels. I remember when my parents were fighting when I was growing up, and it was an icky feeling as a kid because I knew it wasn't right, but that's how my parents communicated. Well, I knew I didn't want that, but that's all I knew. And then we have to be cautious at that generational curse when I got upset that I didn't start acting that way too. So it's almost like a subconscious thing. Yeah. So it's so important to be able to do the best you can.
You bring that up because, like, that generation, our parents, they didn't know what we would know today, which would be like, if you have an explosive, for anybody that's out there and it's like, oh my gosh, I just had this explosive argument with my husband or wife or whatever it is. Nowadays, we give ourselves permission to walk into the kid's bedroom and say, I'm really sorry you heard that. That was really, like, that was icky, or whatever your wording is, right? I'm really sorry you heard that. And that, like, that feels really bad for me. And just know that that's not about you. Your father and I had a disagreement, and we still love each other. And it was it was just a poor judgment on our part that we allowed you to hear that. Like now you're human.
Yeah, we can come back to that, right? We can come back and discuss that
That are the generations above us, our parents just argued, and then we were left to like suck our thumbs in our bedrooms. And
that's where I was.
Right? And we told ourselves these stories about how horrible things were, and because nobody was there to tell us any differently.
Yeah.
Now we give ourselves permission now to be human.
Yeah.
And our kids are begging for us to be human. So when
we know more, we can do more.
Like we're going to screw up. If you screw up, just let your kids know, you know what? That was not cool. And I'm really sorry that I allowed myself to fill in the blank.
And we're going to do better.
And they love you for that. They love you for that.
Yeah, because you're being transparent. Let's go into the last one of the 5 do's that we want to do. And the 5th one is to monitor and supervise. All right. Monitor and supervise. You know, they don't want you in their world. So what does that look like? Mindy, why don't you take the lead on that one? What does that look like to monitor and supervise when our kids are dating? Because we kind of got to stay on the fringe. Yeah, I'm going to throw that one at you, right? So how do we do that? What does that look like?
Yeah, so I think I'm turning red from this one because I'm just thinking back to myself, like when I was that age, you know, and I had a boyfriend and we were secretly meeting each other. Like I was going where I said I was going, but I wasn't with who I said I was going to be with. And so I'm just thinking about what I try to focus on with my kids. And that is, you know, just knowing who their friends are, first of all, because they may not want to say that this is their love interest, you know. And so I think having a good handle on who their friends are and knowing where they're going. Yeah. And, you know, and that might not be that they're with everybody that they say they're going to be with, but having a good idea of who's supposed to be there with them, where they're supposed to be. And I think when you have those things and you just ask questions, you know, and I'm thinking like my parents used to ask me questions to trip me up to see if my story would stay the same, you know, but what I would do with my kids, I was like, oh, you know, so if they're going to the movies or whatever, you know, just asking different things about the movies. And I'm, you know, later on, I'm like looking up, or beforehand, I'm looking up like maybe some details of the movies and, you know, just saying, you know, was there anything that surprised you with the movie? And they'd say, oh, well, I don't want to tell you. And I'm like, well, I'm probably not going to see the movie. I'm just using this as an example. And so I said, you can tell me. And so that was one of the ways that I was showing an interest in them, but also just kind of checking in to see, you know, maybe if they had actually watched the movies. And again, I think this goes back to communication.
Yep.
And that's really about just having, you know, being open to hearing what they have to say. Mm-hmm. And, you know, and sometimes you'll get out of them. Like when my daughter, you know, she did go to a movie with her boyfriend, and I typically would have one of my other children go with them when they would go places, because they did, you know, they would date in groups.
Right.
And so, and one time my oldest daughter went to the movies, and her boyfriend broke up with her right after the movie. And so she wasn't ready to talk about that. You know, she came home very upset. And then my other daughter was able to say, you know, something happened afterwards. So, you know, just be ready to listen when she's ready to talk. And so, so I think that it really is just about, again, like that communication and knowing where they're going and who they're supposed to be with, because then that also gives you an opportunity just to continue cultivating those relationships with their friends as well. Not because they're gonna tell on their friends or whatever but I think just knowing that they can come to your home. Even I'm just thinking about this too. Our home has always been a revolving door of kids in and out. You know, this was the place to be. And so that also allowed us to have those opportunities to get to know the people in their lives.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. It's so important, as you said, taking it back to the number one, which was open communication and building that relationship of trust and mutual respect, not overreacting, being able to probe, ask questions, ask questions, and listen some more. And when we do overreact, or the kids start to feel a reaction, next thing you know, they're shutting down. I'm not telling you anything. And I'm surprised, Mindy, to hear that you would actually tell your parents you were somewhere that you were not.
Although I was typically where I said I was, I just wasn't always with the people I said I was going to be with. So there's a little bit of a difference there.
Definitely a difference there. Definitely a difference there. So 5 things: the open communication, setting clear expectation, education about what a healthy relationship looks like, leading by example, and monitoring and supervising. These are the 5 do's that we want to do. So let's take a look real quick.
Can I add something to that before we bounce off of that?
Sure.
I know we're watching time and we may not get to the don'ts in the 30 minutes that we were talking about, but I think on this one, trust has to be the biggest word, because this is that beautiful opportunity, and we're not looking to trip up our kids, and I'm going to say something really unpopular. I was really hands off, but this was also 2 decades ago. And I know a lot has changed. So for all of our listeners, I acknowledge that your safety level of concern about safety is way larger than mine. But that being said, because like Mindy said, there was the revolving door, we knew the kids. So if we found out that they were someplace and I was just like, well, why did you feel like you couldn't tell me the truth?
Exactly.
Right? Kind of a thing. I let them fail, I let them fail. And it was just always, it was no big deal. It was just like, I don't know why you would think that you need to lie to me about that. And then, so we give them a long leash. And then when they mess up, screw up or whatever, the leash gets a little shorter. And then they have to earn the leash long again. And then when they mess up, the leash gets short again. This is that time because we do trust them. This is when parents, when you trust the job that you've done, this is when the leash is allowed to get a little bit longer, because this is what they need from you, is a little bit of space to kind of flex their wings. So I know that might be a little unpopular, but trust is a 2-way thing.
It is. And it really is. And I talk about opening the gate. And then if they can't be trustworthy, we got to tighten it up again. Right. So it's the same process, because we can't give them full reign. They still need to have the boundaries, but maybe we expand the boundaries. Let's jump into the don'ts.
If they're going to trust us, then we have to trust them as well.
That's right. That's right. All right. 5 don'ts. All right. The first thing is, do not ignore this topic. Okay. We cannot sweep this under the carpet that this is not happening. It is going to happen. And when you're sensing it's happening, it takes it back to the do's. We need to have open communication. So the first thing is, don't ignore the topic. Avoid brushing it off about dating. It's essential that we acknowledge it's a rite of passage. It's going to start happening, and celebrate, that they're building relationships and becoming who they are and finding interest in things that they like about other people. So let's not ignore the topic, because that's just going, then they have no guardrails. If we're not talking about it, there are no guardrails. And the next thing I want to talk about is to not impose those strict rules without an explanation. Who wants to explain that a little bit more? The strict rules without an explanation. Who wants to pick up on that?
Janet.
Janet, go for that.
I just think the worst thing that you can, they're not the worst thing. We've all said, because I said so. Well, because I said so. That doesn't work with today's kids. It just doesn't. And, it's kind of like, does the punishment fit the crime? Does the restriction match, the what it is that you're actually trying to mitigate? And so I think we need to be incredibly intentional about where we are imposing our strictness. And when kids ask, why, you better have a good reason why it is that, it's like, and again, I love you enough to impose this curfew, or to limit this, or for you not to ride with so-and-so. And sometimes that's just because I said so, but it has to be backed up with something that sounds plausible, because the kids today are so smart.
For instance, my daughter, when she was a freshman, and Anna was involved with drama and theater. And so when the prom came around, she's a freshman, there was a senior who invited her to the prom. And that was a hard no for me, for a freshman to go to a senior prom. And there's just an age difference and an expectation. And she's a high S personality who can't say no to anybody. And I just did not want her to be in that position. She was excited. You know, they did all the production together. But in the back of my mind, because I'm a little older and a little wiser, I just knew that that was not going to, I said, I just don't. I had to explain to her that there is an age difference. And sometimes with proms, there's a level of expectation in that relationship. And I would not want to put her in a position that she would have a difficult time with a potential expectation. So she will have her senior prom. It just won't be this year. And I did have to, I knew she was not happy about it. She understood it, but I had to explain to her why I had concerns at that developmental age. You know what I mean? She was just a freshman with a senior, and I was not, no, it was just a no. But I did have to explain to her why I had my concerns. And she had her prom. You know, she did her thing, her year, you know, and it was a different thing. But I just knew that understanding her personality and what her blind spot would be, that if I put her into a position where there was probably potential for alcohol and potential for sexual things that she was not necessarily ready for, I just, no. So I just had to explain it in that soft, kind way. Let's go to the next one. All right. Don't dismiss their feelings. Don't dismiss their feelings. Mindy, why don't you grab onto that one?
So, you know, I think that we all were raised maybe in our with our parents' generation that it's like, it was because they said so. Right. And it was because, or if I was considered sensitive when I was younger, and it's like, suck it up, you're too sensitive, toughen up. And so I didn't feel always comfortable going to my parents and talking to them. I think that the one time that we really had conversations around anything was around anger, and that was like, you get it together, and not being able to recognize that there's a difference between the feeling and the actions. And so I think that these are really important conversations to have with our kids, and they're all over the place, and their brains, when you think about it, they're remodeling. So a lot of times it's the feeling part of their brain, the very primitive part of their brain that's in control. And when we can help them to figure out what it is that they're feeling, bring some awareness to that, and then listen, and then give them some guidance on, okay, so this is what you're feeling, and here are some ways that you can go about dealing with that. That they're going to have so much more emotional intelligence than I think that I have ever had, except for like maybe this time period of life, because that wasn't something I know that was discussed with me. And those were things that I really wanted, skills that I really wanted my kids to have. And I think for the kids nowadays, with so many different things going on in the world, you want them to be able to have that ability to express their feelings, know that those feelings are okay, and then what to do with them.
Yeah, there's a lot of feelings that in that age that they can be feeling that they may not have felt before. Sometimes it's a euphoria of feeling as though they're in love. Sometimes there's the jealousy if they feel as though they don't have enough time with that person. And then there's the feeling of the heartbreak when it falls apart. And a lot of times it will at that age, And so they are going to be feeling some deep and hard feelings through this season of, like I said, the highs and the lows. And then feelings of rejection if it doesn't work out. And so how can we acknowledge that it's hard and be empathetic and buy them the chocolate ice cream, and get a spoon and sit with them, when it gets hard. So don't dismiss those feelings, embrace them. And even if they don't want to talk about it, just be there for them and let them know. Or what I've done is I shared some of my experiences. That was an opportunity for me to say, I remember when this happened and how it hurt and how I was shut down and how I didn't even want to go to school the next day. And, so just be able to not dismiss it, but embrace it. Let's move on to the next thing. The next one is, Jan, I'm going to let you handle this one. Don't hover excessively. So that was that boundary of that we had talked about with the do's. You know what I mean? We want to be able to monitor and supervise, but don't hover excessively. So what does that look like? What does that look like?
I probably could write an entire book on, the helicopter parent. And I don't say that with any malice at all, because I understand, again, the times are very different, but there's just no place for hovering. kids can't grow when they are being smothered. You know, there's a real balance between letting them know that you've got their back and sitting on their backs. Right. There's a big difference. And our job is to trust the job that we have done up to this point. Hopefully we are talking about at least something that ends in teen, right? Like 13, 14, 16, 17, and not 10 when we're talking about dating. And we just have to trust that we've done a good job for them to be able to regulate emotionally at least a little bit, or make good decisions, or be able to say no. Or, you know, your example with your daughter, like, what would you do if somebody at the prom asked you if you wanted, you know, was snuck in a flask? And she's like, I don't know. It's like, that's exactly why you can't go. Right. Right.
Exactly what it was.
So it's like, and these are those kinds of conversations that if we've done our job and the kid, like, then we should just give them the leash.
Yeah. Don't cover excessively.
And let them do it. So again, I guess the rule of thumb, I said it best the first time. I should have just stopped talking. We can't, you know, rather than sit up, be on their backs all the time, we just have to just let them go.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, can I add something in?
Trust. Please do. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, what I was thinking too is that, you know, our own anxiety, we don't need to push that off on them, because our kids are very perceptive. They're watching us. They're, you know, they are experts in our body language, our facial expressions, you know, the things that we say and we don't say. And so when they sense that we're anxious about something, then it makes them wonder, like, is this something that I should be anxious about? And they can pick up on that. And, you know, we want them to have the confidence to be able to go and try these things, like to be in a relationship and learn what healthy relationships look like and what is good communication and all these different things. And when they sense that we're worried or anxious about it, then I think that ultimately impacts their confidence as well.
That's so true. And it really will, when we're not hovering, if we have that relationship of trust and mutual respect, if we have that open communication, we shouldn't have to hover. You know, if we are monitoring and supervising from afar, if we're watching things that are going on, if we feel as though we have that close relationship, that if we do see something that feels a little bit off, just to be able to inquire and ask how they feel about it, that's the way to do it. But when you are on them every minute of every day of everything they do, you're going to get rebellion out of that. They're going to become sneaky and they're going to lie. And now we've broken the trust. So do not hover excessively. The last thing we want to get back to, and we talked about this earlier, is do not forget to set a good example. Modeling a healthy relationship in our behaviors, in our communication, and the skills that we apply in our relationships is what they will come to expect. So if you have a healthy relationship in your home, and then they're with a significant other or a boyfriend or girlfriend who seems to speak a little harshly or uses a harsh tone, it may feel uncomfortable to them. So they're recognizing that that's maybe not a healthy relationship to be in. So it is so important in what we do. It's not what we say. They are watching what we do. And granted, we talked about there's going to be times, because we're married and in relationships, that we're going to have our explosions, but to tell our kids, that probably wasn't the best way to handle it. We're going to try and do better, because that becomes their normal. And we don't want kids to feel as though a disrespectful relationship or a controlling relationship is normal. It's not healthy. It is just not healthy. So anything else you guys want to add to this before we kind of sign off? This was a lot of fun, a lot of good conversation here.
I just wanted to give parents that, are at home and they're maybe a single parent or they're newly divorced or something like that. Because we talk a lot about, being role models in healthy relationships and things like that. There are ways to navigate a non-traditional relationship. The example that you just gave, Karen, was perfect. Like if you heard kids in the next room having a conversation, and you wouldn't want to say anything when they're there because that's embarrassing, but you could then come afterwards and just say, I couldn't help it over here. That didn't feel good to me. Did it feel good to you? Exactly. Kind of a thing. And so if we don't have the ability to model healthy, then at least be able to point out healthy with them. And it can be talked about if it can't be modeled.
Right.
And I think that's just important. We'd have to give all parents in whatever situation they are in permission to get creative, to make all of the points that we made, both the do's and the don'ts, because it's just not, I mean, we understand it's just not a perfect relationship world. So
yeah, these are just some guidelines, 5 do's and 5 don'ts. So next steps for the parents, what was your biggest takeaway? What are the things that you feel as though you are doing and you're comfortable with doing? And what are some of the don'ts that you feel as though, no, I'm not doing that. Ooh, but maybe I have been tripping up on this. This is just an awareness and some guidelines of how we can guide our kids to have healthy relationships when they begin dating through the teen years. So if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to post them under these videos. If you wanted to reach out to either Mindy or Janet, you can tag them in those if you had any insights that you wanted to share, and then we'll be able to get back and respond to you. This is so important as we enter into this transformational season of parenting. When we get rid of parenting our little kids and we are entering into the adolescent years, that we don't ignore that this is a rite of passage, parents. It's going to happen. I've had parents message me and say, I forbid them. They're not allowed to date. And I'm like, it's already happening. It's already happening. So let's not ignore it. We need to work and guide our kids to having healthy relationships. So I want to thank everybody for joining us. And I look forward to continuing conversations as we have real talk with the Parenting Blueprint coaches, getting beyond the blueprint and getting deeper into the issues that we're dealing with. If you have concerns in your relationships or things that you're dealing with in parenting, we'd love to hear more from you. So feel free to send me a message. You can send one to Mindy or send one to Janet, that these are some topics that you'd like to explore, and we will put together another topic that we can talk about. Maybe we'll even bring you in for some hot seat coaching and get your insights and help you process through some of the things that you're going through. We are here to support you. So thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time. Bye.
hi, everybody.